Chapter 1. Mythologies are how we make sense of much of life. Campbell saw the world in mythological terms in his lifetime. He believed there are mythological themes rooted in human need. We carry out different rituals to express this need. Funerals, for example, helps us reestablish the sense of solidarity we have with one another when a life is taken away. Think of judges in our society. Their power is ritualized for the law to hold authority. They put on the magisterial black robe instead of wearing whatever they chose to court. From religion and war to love and death, much of life must be ritualized, mythologized for it to be meaningful to us. Myths, even when we deny them, line the walls of our interior system of disbelief like shards of broken pottery in an archaeological site. It is through rituals that we evoke the energy stored in these mythologies. George Lucas, the filmmaker of Star Wars, once invited Moyers and Campbell to view the Star Wars trilogy at Lucas Skywalker Ranch in California. Campbell beamed with delight as he saw ancient themes and motifs of mythology reenacted in powerful contemporary images. In the movie, Campbell saw a new spin to the classic story of the hero. The hero symbolizes our ability to control the irrational savage within us. Luke Skywalker was never more rational than when he found within himself the resources of character to meet his destiny. Joseph Campbell. In the end, we will have to rely not on technology, computers, tools, or machines to save us, but on our intuition. To be a hero is to act in ways to redeem society. The difference between a celebrity and a hero is that the former lives only for self, while the latter has found the wisdom and power to serve others. Campbell believed life to be an adventure, and that one sure path into the world runs along the printed page. His journey toward becoming one of the world's leading scholars of mythology started as a boy who visited the Museum of Natural History in New York. He wanted to know the stories behind the totem poles and masks he had seen. Moyers encountered Campbell in his quest to bring the lively minds of the time to television. Having learned at his feet, Moyers vowed to share the treasure he found from a systematic and thorough exploration of the ideas. The following pages explore some of these ideas. Chapter 2. Campbell was a great teacher who taught by example rather than talking people into belief. He revealed a joy for learning and living. His belief was that preachers ought to reveal the radiance of their own discovery rather than trying to talk people into belief. The guiding principle of Campbell's work was the pursuit of a commonality of themes in myths all over the world to find a center in terms of deep principles that guide all humans. He was not searching for the meaning of life, but for the experience of being alive. Campbell considered mythology the music of the spheres. We dance to this music whether we know the tune or not. Through storytelling, our primal ancestors explained the timeless cycle of death, burial, and resurrection. They learned that the essence of life is that it lives by killing and eating. That's the great mystery that the myths have to deal with. When they shifted from hunting to planting, these ancestors told a different story to interpret the mystery of life. The same theme of death, burial, and resurrection exists in the dying, burial, and germination of a seed. The impulse to form religion came from the oral literature and cave wall paintings of our primal ancestors. Campbell found principles common to the human spirit in the literature of faith and different world religions. All our names and images for God are masks signifying the ultimate reality that, by definition, transcends language and art. A myth is a mask of God, too, a metaphor for what lies behind the visible world. Bill Moyers. Campbell knew how to nurture imagination through storytelling. He was also optimistic about the possibility of a synthesis between science and spirit. He believed that lives can be put back together again if we allow the new discoveries of science to enable us to rejoin the ancients. It is not science that has diminished human beings or disconnected us from divinity. In fact, we are participating in a great leap of the human spirit to a knowledge of both outside nature and our own deep inward mystery. Campbell showed the connection between Sunday school stories and those of other cultures that recognize the soul's high adventure and the attempt by mortals to grasp the reality of God. Campbell envisioned a mighty multicultural future. Campbell was a wise man who lived an authentic life that instructs us today. He had versatile knowledge of our panoramic past, and he danced to the music of the spheres. Chapter 3. What we seek in life is not meaning, but a resonance between our physical and emotional lives. When our life's experiences align with our innermost being and reality, what results is the rapture of being alive. A problem we face today is that we focus on the concerns of the day so much that we have little or no time for eternal values. But if Occidental mythology information is part of our education, we are able to see the relationship between these stories and what is happening in our lives. Stories help us to harmonize our lives with reality. It is our imperfections that make life interesting. We love children because they fall down all the time. We love dogs because they are so imperfect. Some people do not love God because there is no imperfection in Him. But when they think of Christ on the cross, that's relatable and lovable. They can identify with this development from childhood to adulthood. Perfection is boring. Humans are interesting and lovable because they are not supernatural and immortal. Myths give us the clue to the spiritual potential the human life holds. Real myths help us to turn inwards to find the inner value of doing the things we do, to experience life. When we read the myths of other people's religion, we are able to put our minds in touch with the experience of being alive. We need to read other people's myths because we tend to interpret the myths of our own religion as facts. Consider the example of marriage. Myth tells you marriage is a reunion of the separated duad, but in modern times, marriage is considered a love affair. If you marry because you want to enter into a long-term love affair, divorce will be inevitable. If, however, you think of marriage as recognition of a spiritual identity, you will find your proper male or female counterpart. Don't get distracted by sensual attraction. Recognize that marriage is the reunion of self with self at a primarily spiritual level, and make that your priority if you want to enjoy long-lasting marriage. Defining marriage in terms of biological features is a distraction which leads many to a wrong identification. There are two completely different stages of marriage. First is the youthful marriage following the wonderful impulse that nature has given us in the interplay of the sexes biologically in order to produce children. But there comes a time when the child graduates from the family and the couple is left. Joseph Campbell. Marriage is more than a love affair. It is an ordeal to sacrifice your ego to a relationship in which two have become one. Marriage is doing one's own thing, but recognizing that the one thing isn't just you, but two together as one. Chapter 4. We live in a demythologized world with grave consequences. Without myths, our societies open the door to violence. Puberty rites in primal societies helped young people to identify their transition from childhood to adulthood. For example, there was a time when young boys wore shorts and were allowed to wear long trousers only after they transitioned to adulthood. Therefore, there is no point of transition from childhood to adulthood. In a homogeneous culture, there are unwritten rules by which people live. These unwritten rules are called ethos, and they're usually blended into myths such that people have a certain way of doing things that is peculiar to them. They do not need a long list of do's and don'ts. Schools do not teach the life values of their subjects. We are no longer learning the wisdom of life. What we are learning are technologies and the need for specialization. The stories and myths are about the wisdom of life, and that's why they are needed in our society. We need to learn what to do, how to do them, and why we do what we do. Some of the mythological rituals at work in our society include standing up when a judge walks into the room, wedding ceremonies to go from the unmarried to the married state, joining the army to accept a socially determined manner of life, bowing before a king or queen, giving honor to the president of your country. The disappearance of myths has led to a disintegration of society. Civilizations are becoming deceased since our myths began to disappear. This is not an advocacy for old-time religions. Instead, it is the need for the moral order to catch up with the moral necessities of actual life. Following old-time religions that are not adapted to modern-day realities throws you out of sync with history. When kids lose their faith in the religions that were taught to them, they go inside and often opt for mechanically induced mystical experience. When you have a spiritual experience that you were not prepared for, it will cause you to drown where you were meant to swim. Chapter 5. Myths exemplify the external truth that humanity is one. The human psyche is essentially the same all over the world. All human beings have the same organs, the same instincts, the same impulses, the same conflicts, and the same fears. We have a common ground irrespective of where we grow up and what religion we practice. Out of this common ground comes the archetypes. Archetypes are common ideas of myths. When you consider the creation idea in Genesis with the Hindu Upanishads or with the legends of the Basari people of West Africa, you get similar ideas. When we subscribe to these myths, we are looking for a way to experience the world that will open up the transcendent that informs it, and at the same time forms ourselves within it. We seek myths to have instruction that will enable us to experience the divine presence. When you visit an Indian home, you are greeted with the palms placed together in a bow. This symbol is analogous to our posture when we pray. Essentially, the Indians recognize the divine presence in you. Hence, they greet you as a visiting deity. A real mythological realization is the discovery of a central point where movement and stillness are together. Stillness indicates eternity, while movement represents time. The mythological experience is realized that what you are doing now is an experience of the eternal aspect of your existence. Every moment of your life is a moment of eternity. Each of us manifests the mystery of our eternal existence in every moment of our lives and in every decision we make in those moments. This centering is a mythological way of being an individual. God is an intelligible sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. Joseph Campbell. Chapter 6. The fundamental function of mythology is the sanctification of the local landscape. The landscape paints a holy picture. You feel a sense of belonging to something ancient and alive. A basic mood of man is the sense of the presence of creation. Living in a city makes it difficult to find this basic mood because of the stones and rocks manufactured by human hands. When you live in or visit a forest, the little chipmunks and great owls will alert you to the forces and powers of life. You become aware of magical possibilities of life that are not yours and yet are all part of life. It is important for each person to have a sacred place, a room, an hour, or a day when you disconnect from everything. You spend this time bringing forth what you are and what you might be. It is a place of creative incubation. Nothing might happen at first, but as you continue to use this sacred place, something will eventually happen to you. The economic and practical orientation of our lives necessitates this sacred place. The ancients saw the entire world as a sacred place. Not so today. In your sacred place, you can play the music you love, read the book you like, and get the feeling of life that the ancients had throughout their lifetime. By mythologizing plants and animals, people turn their land into a place of spiritual relevance. Like Jacob's dream where he saw angels ascending and descending, you find an example of how a person claimed the land for spiritual relevance. The place where he had the dream became Bethel, the house of God. Sacred places no longer exist today. What we have are historical spots where we go to think about important things that happened there in the past. Pilgrimages to the Holy Land is an example. Did you know Mexico City was a sacred site, one of the great cities in the world before the Spanish tore it apart? Conclusion. Myths are powerful and empowering. They bring order to a world that would otherwise be chaotic. Myths across different cultures and geographical locations have a centrality to them that shows the oneness of nature. Often, people mistake metaphors as literal facts. Consequently, they are unable to grasp the inner realities of some of the myths that have been told in their childhood. For example, immortality is often misunderstood as being an everlasting body instead of identifying with the eternity in your own life now. Immortality is the capacity to go from becoming to being. Becoming is fractional, but being is total. Instead of seeing our lives as unfolding in fragments as we grow from childhood to adulthood, it is more beneficial to understand that what we are going to become tomorrow is not important compared to the experience we have in the moment. The deficiency of our language to adequately describe God makes us depend on poetry. Poetry allows us to choose words that have implications and suggestions that go past the words themselves. Sheer life has no purpose. It is a lot of protoplasm with an urge to keep reproducing and carry on its existence. Instead, life can be said to have a potentiality, and the mission of life is to live that potentiality. The way to do that is to follow your bliss. By following your bliss, something inside you will tell you when you are in the center, on track or off track. Moving away from the center to earn money leads to loss of life. But if you stay on track and don't make any money, your bliss stays intact. The choice is yours. When you're on a journey and the end keeps getting further and further away, then you realize that the real end is the journey. Carl Fried Graf Durkheim. Try this. Do you have a sacred place? Dedicate a space where you can be disconnected from the world around you and focus on your center. Play music you love or read a book you like. You can just sit in silence if that helps you to look inward and birth the creative possibilities that are stored within you. It might feel like a waste of time at first, but you need to continue this practice until something eventually happens.